Welcome to the Deep Fear channel. Watch closely, stay alert, and don't forget to subscribe. Story 1. The House That Waited. When I first saw the house, I thought it was perfect. It sat on the edge of a quiet street, surrounded by towering oak trees that seemed to shield it from the rest of the world. The realtor told me it had been vacant for 50 years. The previous owner, some old recluse named Harold Price, had died without heirs. The city had held the property, locked up and untouched, until it finally went up for auction. I didn't believe in curses or bad energy or any of that. I was 29, eager to own my first real home, and this one came at a price so low it felt like theft. When I walked inside for the first time, the air was stale, thick with the smell of dust and mildew. Yet, beneath it all, there was something else, something sharp, like the metallic tang of rust or blood. The floors creaked beneath my steps, but not in the normal way old houses groan. It felt deliberate, almost like each groan answered my weight, like the house was aware of me. The realtor laughed it off. Old houses settle, that's all. But she didn't stay long. She handed me the keys, avoided eye contact, and rushed back to her car as though she was late for something. That night, after hauling boxes into the living room, I sat cross-legged on the dusty hardwood with a beer in my hand. The house loomed quiet around me. Too quiet. Even the crickets outside seemed to avoid chirping near the walls. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. Just nerves. New space, old wood, long day. But when I finally lay down on the mattress I had dragged into the bedroom, I heard it. A click. It came from the hallway outside my door. Not the creak of wood, not the settling of pipes. A clear metallic click, like a lock turning. I held my breath, staring at the crack beneath my door. And that's when I realized something that chilled me to my bones. All the locks in this house had been removed. The realtor told me so herself. Too outdated, she said. The city had them taken out. So what had just clicked? I told myself it was nothing. Maybe an old vent closing, maybe wood snapping in the night air. But the sound had been too precise, too deliberate. Sleep didn't come easy after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the doorknob twisting slowly, the door creaking open, and something stepping into the room. But nothing came. At least, not that night. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the dusty curtains. It was almost comforting. How ordinary the house looked in daylight. I laughed at myself, shaking my head. First night jitters, that's all. I unpacked, swept the floors, opened windows to chase out the stale air. That's when I noticed something odd about the windows upstairs. They had locks. Not new locks, ancient brass fixtures that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. They were still latched tight. I tugged at one, but it didn't budge. Strange. The realtor swore the city removed all the locks. That night, I set up more of my furniture. As I hammered a nail into the wall to hang a picture, I noticed the walls were hollow. Not in the way drywall feels hollow, but empty. When I knocked, the echo lasted too long, like there was space behind the plaster. Almost like the walls weren't walls at all, but doors that had been sealed. I tried not to think about it. By midnight, I was lying in bed again, scrolling on my phone to distract myself. The house was quieter than quiet. No hum of appliances, no cars outside, no crickets. Just silence pressing in on me. Then it came again. Click. This time I sat bolt upright. My ears strained. It wasn't in the hallway. It was closer. The sound had come from inside my room. I turned my phone's flashlight toward the corner, half expecting to see a figure. Nothing. Just my boxes, the dresser, the chair. I forced myself to get up, searching every inch. No intruder, no open windows, no doors other than the one I had locked with a chain I'd brought myself. I almost convinced myself I was losing it, until I noticed something on the floorboards by the corner. A thin line, a seam, like the outline of a small square hatch, hidden in the wood. My heart thudded in my chest. I knelt down, brushing away years of dust. It wasn't just a hatch. It had a tiny, rusted keyhole in the center, and around it, scratched into the wood in shaky letters, were 3 words: "Don't let it out." I didn't sleep after finding the hatch. I sat in the chair with the lights on, staring at it, half expecting the damn thing to start rattling. It didn't move. Not that night. The following day, I considered prying it open. Curiosity burned in me, but those words, "Don't let it out," kept echoing. Who had written that? The previous owner? A squatter? Someone who knew something I didn't? Instead, I distracted myself with chores. I unpacked more boxes, checked the plumbing, made lists of what needed repairs. Normal things. Safe things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to match my steps, as if the house had its own rhythm that I was disturbing. That night, I tried to block out the hatch. I shoved a heavy dresser over the corner of the floor, hiding it completely. Out of sight, out of mind. Or so I thought. At 2:14 a.m., I woke up to a scraping sound. Wood against wood. Slow. Deliberate. I turned on my lamp. The dresser was sliding forward, inch by inch, away from the corner. No one was there. No hand. No leverage. It was just moving as though something beneath the floor was pushing upward. My skin crawled. I jumped out of bed and shoved the dresser back into place, pressing all my weight against it. The movement stopped instantly. Silence filled the room again, but now the silence felt disappointed, like whatever was down there had been so close. I didn't sleep again. I sat in the chair, gripping a hammer like it could save me, watching the dresser all night. By morning, my eyes were bloodshot, my nerves shredded. But when sunlight hit the room, I forced myself to believe it was just stress, exhaustion. Until I saw the dresser, it wasn't flush against the wall anymore. It had been pulled back again, just an inch this time, but enough to show that I hadn't imagined it. And on the wood near the dresser's legs, new words were scratched into the floor. The letters were jagged, frantic, like they'd been carved from the inside out. Let me breathe. I should have left right then. I should have packed a bag and run. But exhaustion and denial kept me frozen. Instead, I convinced myself it was a prank. Maybe kids sneaking in, maybe some weird draft moving the wood. But the truth was, I knew better. The 4th night, I woke to a new sound. Not a click, not a scrape, a whisper. At first, it was so faint I thought it was the wind, but it grew louder, rising from beneath the floorboards, from behind the walls, from every hollow space in the house. One word, over and over. "Please, please, please." The voice was thin, rasping, desperate. I grabbed my flashlight, shining it on the dresser. It was no longer against the wall. The hatch was fully exposed, and it was open. A gap just wide enough for stale air to spill out, carrying with it that metallic stench I had noticed the first day. Blood, rot, rust, all mixed together. I wanted to run, but my legs locked. My light caught something pale, something moving in the crack. Fingers, thin, gray, and far too long, curling against the floorboards as if feeling for me. The whisper stopped. Silence. Then a different voice, low and wet, spoke from the hatch. "You came back." The boards beneath me shuddered, as if the whole house exhaled. The walls creaked, the ceiling groaned, the nails holding everything together seemed to sigh with relief. That's when I understood. The house hadn't just been empty for 50 years. It had been waiting. Waiting for someone to open the hatch. Waiting for me. The pale fingers gripped the wood and began to pull. The gap widened, blackness spilling into the room like ink. I bolted. I didn't stop to grab clothes or money or even my phone. I tore down the stairs, the sound of splintering wood chasing me as the hatch ripped open behind me. The front door slammed shut as I reached it, but I didn't think. I threw my body through the nearest window, crashing out into the night. When I landed on the lawn, I looked back once. Just once. The house wasn't dark anymore. Every window glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. And behind the glass, something moved. Not one thing. Many. Shapes pressed against the panes, too twisted and wrong to be human, but watching me. I ran until my lungs burned, until the house was far behind me. I never went back. The house was boarded up again soon after, the property records buried in legal disputes. But sometimes, late at night, I dream of it. I dream of the hatch opening. I dream of the house whispering my name. And when I wake, I swear I can still smell that metallic stench seeping up from beneath my own floorboards. Because maybe I never really left. Story 2. The Room with No Door. When Melissa and I bought the house, it felt like a dream. A 2-story colonial on a quiet street, perfect for our little girl, Hannah. The seller gave us a thick folder of documents, permits, inspection reports, even the original blueprints from the 1950s. I remember spreading them across the kitchen counter, tracing the neat lines and labels with my finger. Living room, dining room, kitchen, 3 bedrooms upstairs, everything matched perfectly. Except there was something odd. On the blueprint of the 2nd floor, between the master bedroom and Hannah's room, there was a small square space, unlabeled, no measurements, just an empty box walled in on all sides. I laughed it off. Probably just a mistake. Draftsmen back then weren't using computers, right? But Melissa frowned. That's weird. Doesn't it look like another room? We measured the hallway upstairs. Sure enough, the distance between our bedroom and Hannah's didn't add up. According to the house itself, there was more space than the floor plan allowed. Space that had been sealed away. A room with no door. That night, after Hannah went to bed, I tapped along the hallway wall. The sound changed halfway down. Hollow, not solid. Melissa whispered, "There's something behind there." I told her it was probably insulation. But in the back of my mind, a thought kept whispering, why would someone build a room and then seal it off completely? We should have left it alone, but we didn't. The thought gnawed at us for days. Every time I walked past that stretch of hallway, I felt it pressing back, like a secret swelling behind the walls. Finally, I caved. One Saturday afternoon, I grabbed a hammer and crowbar, Melissa stood behind me, biting her lip as Hannah played downstairs, oblivious. The first hit cracked the drywall easily. Dust spilled into the air. With a few more swings, I punched through. Behind the wall was another wall. But this one wasn't drywall. It was old wood, dark and warped. Someone had built a second barrier. I pried at the boards. Nails squealed as they came free, one by one. Then, with a final tug, a gap opened wide enough for my flashlight. What I saw made my stomach twist. A small room, maybe 10 feet by 10, dusty wallpaper peeling in strips, a wooden chair in the center, and something scratched into the floorboards. Deep grooves, too deliberate to be random. Melissa whispered, "Oh my God, is that blood?" It looked like it. Brown-black stains caked the floor around the chair. The scratches weren't random at all. They formed words. "Don't let her out!" I pulled back, heart racing. Every instinct screamed to seal it back up. Pretend we hadn't seen it. But Melissa was already reaching through the gap. "There's a door on the other side. See? They walled it from both ends." She was right. My flashlight caught the outline of a door on the opposite wall, painted shut. "Why would someone—" she started. We never finished the thought, because just then, from inside the sealed room, came the faintest sound. The sound of something breathing. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my hand. Melissa grabbed my arm. "Tell me you heard that." I wanted to lie. I wanted to say it was the house settling, or the wind, or a trick of acoustics. But the sound came again. Shallow, ragged breathing. Too human. Too close. We should have stopped. We should have sealed the hole back up and called the cops. But instead, some awful curiosity pulled me forward. I'll check," my voice cracked. I pried away the rest of the boards one by one. The opening widened, spilling stale, suffocating air into the hallway. The smell of mold and iron burned my nose. Melissa covered her mouth. "God!" I climbed through first. My feet landed on the sticky floorboards, dust swirling in the beam of my flashlight. The chair sat in the center, its legs stained dark. Rope fragments dangled from the armrest, frayed with age. Whoever had been here hadn't just sat, they'd been tied. And those words carved into the wood, "Don't let her out," seemed fresher than they should have been. Melissa followed me in, clutching my sleeve. "This isn't right," she whispered. "It's not just some storage room. This was for keeping someone here." I swept the light across the walls. More scratches. Vertical marks, claw-like, gouged into the wallpaper as though fingernails had torn at it in desperation. Then the beam hit the far wall. The door Melissa had noticed was there. Heavy, wooden, bolted shut from our side. Someone had locked it to keep whatever or whoever inside. That's when the breathing stopped. The silence was worse. My ears strained, my chest tight. And then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Not violently, not frantic, just a slow, steady twist, as if someone on the other side knew we were there and had been waiting for us to open it. Melissa grabbed my arm. "Don't! Please, don't!" But my body moved before my mind caught up. I stepped closer, hand reaching for the bolt. Something inside me whispered, soft and coaxing, "She just wants to be free." My fingers hovered over the bolt. It was rusted, stiff, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Melissa clutched my wrist. "Don't you hear yourself?" she hissed. "Something's in there. Something's been kept in there for a reason." But that whisper in my head grew louder, almost soothing now. I've been so lonely. Just one bolt. Please. I yanked my hand free and slid the bolt. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed like a scream. The doorknob stopped turning. Silence. Then, with a slow groan, the door pushed inward. The flashlight beam shook in my trembling hand as the darkness beyond yawned open. It wasn't another hallway or closet. It was just more blackness, as if the space behind the door stretched far deeper than the dimensions of the house should have allowed. The air pouring out was icy, wrong. Melissa backed away. Close it now. But before I could move, something stepped forward. Not walked, glided. At first, all I saw was the outline of a figure, tall, thin, hair hanging in filthy ropes. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle as though bones had healed crooked. Its feet didn't touch the floor. I froze. My brain screamed at me to slam the door, but my body wouldn't obey. The figure drifted past the threshold and stopped in the center of the room, right beside the chair. That's when I saw its face, or what was left of it. The skin looked stretched, translucent, as if it had been pulled too tight over the skull. The eyes were sunken pits, but deep inside them burned a faint red glow. The mouth opened wide, wider than it should have, revealing cracked teeth and a dark, endless throat. Melissa screamed. The thing turned its head toward her, and for the first time, it spoke. Not in my head, but aloud. A voice like broken glass whispered, "Thank you for letting me out." And the door slammed shut behind it. The slam shook the walls. Hannah screamed from her bedroom down the hall. Melissa bolted for her, but the figure was faster. It glided past us, dissolving into a blur of shadow and hair. By the time we reached Hannah's door, it was already inside. I shoved it open. The thing stood over her bed. Hannah was frozen, wide-eyed, her little hands clutching her blanket. The figure leaned down, its face inches from hers, mouth yawning open as though inhaling her breath. "No!" I lunged, swinging the flashlight like a club. It passed through the figure as if through smoke, the beam scattering inside its body before snapping back. The thing didn't even flinch. Melissa grabbed Hannah, pulling her off the bed. For a moment, I thought we were safe, until the figure whispered again, this time in Hannah's voice, "Mommy, Daddy, don't let her take me back." Hannah went limp in Melissa's arms. Her eyes rolled back. The figure melted into her body like ink sinking into water. Melissa screamed and shook her. I stood frozen, watching as our daughter's small frame convulsed once, then stilled. When she looked up at us, it wasn't Hannah's eyes staring back. They glowed faint red. Her lips peeled into a too-wide grin, and in that broken glass voice, she whispered, "It feels so good to be free." Melissa collapsed, sobbing, clutching her. I dragged them both out of the house, out into the cold night air, refusing to look back. We never went inside again. The very next morning, we packed a car and drove until the house was just a nightmare behind us. But Hannah isn't Hannah anymore. She laughs at things that aren't funny. She whispers to the walls at night, as if something's still listening. Sometimes I catch her standing at the corner of a room, her head tilted at that same unnatural angle, her lips moving soundlessly. Last night, as I tucked her in, she leaned close and whispered in my ear, "There are more rooms in this world than you think, and some of them don't have doors for a reason. I don't know how long we have before whatever's inside her finishes what it started. But one thing is certain, We should never have opened that room. We let her out. Story 3. The previous owner never left. When the listing went live, I thought it was too good to be true. A 3-bedroom farmhouse fully furnished for a fraction of what other homes in the area cost. The photos showed a cozy interior, floral wallpaper, antique furniture, framed photos from the 1970s still hanging on the walls. The realtor explained that the last owner, a man named Arthur Bell, had passed away, and his distant relatives wanted the property off their hands quickly. The place felt lived in a strange way. The kitchen table was still set for dinner, plates stacked neatly, silverware polished. There were blankets folded on the sofa, a rocking chair by the fireplace, even slippers tucked under the bed in the master bedroom. It was as if Arthur had just stepped out for groceries and never come back. Melissa joked, "Feels like he might walk in on us any second." I laughed, but unease prickled at the back of my neck. That first night, we didn't bother unpacking much. We ordered pizza, sat on Arthur's old couch, and toasted to our new home. But when we woke the next morning, something was off. The pizza boxes we'd left on the counter were gone. Not just thrown away, gone. In their place sat a neat breakfast, toast, eggs, bacon, and black coffee. Steam still curled from the cup. Melissa stared at me. "Did you?" I shook my head. "I thought you did." Neither of us had cooked. Neither of us even liked black coffee. And yet, someone had made it. Someone who still lived here. We tried to laugh it off. Maybe a neighbor had a spare key, some kind of weird welcome gesture. Still, the unease lingered. That evening, Melissa unpacked our dishes into the kitchen cabinets while I set up the living room. I pushed Arthur's old rocking chair into the corner. It was rickety, the wood splintering. Then I hung our framed wedding photo above the fireplace, replacing the faded portrait of Arthur that had been there before. It felt good, claiming the space as ours. But when we came downstairs the next morning, the room had changed. The rocking chair was back in front of the fireplace, creaking slowly as though someone had just left it. Our wedding photo lay face down on the mantel, and Arthur's portrait hung in its place. Melissa's face drained of color. "You moved that chair, didn't you?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah." "And you took that picture down?" "Yes." Neither of us spoke the obvious. Someone or something had put it back. The same thing kept happening all week. Melissa stocked the fridge with groceries. We woke to find them gone, replaced with canned goods, decades past expiration. I tried to move the master bed. Every morning it was back against the wall where Arthur had kept it, perfectly aligned with the faded indentations in the carpet. It wasn't just objects. The atmosphere of the house shifted. At night, we heard the faint scrape of slippers across the floorboards, the soft rattle of a newspaper being unfolded. Once, I woke to the smell of pipe smoke, heavy in the bedroom, though neither of us smoked. Melissa whispered to me one night, "It's like he doesn't know he's dead." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, I knew she wasn't. And then came the night we found Arthur's slippers. They weren't under the bed anymore. They were neatly placed by the door to our bedroom, waiting for him. We tried to ignore the slippers, but the message was clear. This was his house, not ours. The next morning, we came downstairs to find the dining table set, not with our dishes, Arthur's. Heavy ceramic plates, silver utensils engraved with a cursive "Be a steaming plate of eggs and bacon," sat at the head of the table, beside a folded newspaper dated 1974. Melissa whispered, He's setting the table for himself. We left it untouched. By evening, the food was gone. Not cleaned, not rotted. Gone. That night, we heard the rocking chair. The creak, creak, creak of it moving on its own, steady as a heartbeat. I crept to the living room door and peeked in. The chair rocked in front of the fireplace, and in it, though faint as cigarette smoke, was the outline of a man. I saw him only for a second. Balding head, thick glasses, cardigan sweater. The shape of Arthur Bell. He wasn't solid, but he was there. He turned his head toward me, and though his face was blurry, I felt the weight of his gaze. A voice, deep and patient, echoed in my head. Respect my house, and I'll respect you. My chest clenched. I shut the door, heart hammering. When I told Melissa she wanted to leave immediately. Bags packed, car on the road. But I couldn't. Not yet. This house had been our dream. Besides, Arthur didn't sound angry. He sounded reasonable. So we made a silent pact. We wouldn't move his furniture anymore. We'd leave his portrait up, his slippers by the bed. We'd live around him. For a few days, it worked. The noises quieted. The air grew lighter. Until Melissa made a mistake. One night, while setting the table for dinner, she moved Arthur's chair to the far end so Hannah could sit at the head instead. It was a small thing, a normal thing. But when we came down the next morning, Hannah's chair was overturned, her plate smashed on the floor, and carved deep into the wood of the table in jagged letters was a single word: mine. After that night, there was no pretending Arthur was harmless. The rocking chair never stopped anymore. Day and night, it creaked by the fireplace, moving as if invisible weight pressed it. The air filled with the smell of pipe smoke, so thick it burned our throats. Hannah started waking up crying, saying an old man stood in her room, whispering that she was sitting in his spot. Melissa begged me to leave, but each time we packed, something happened. Our suitcases would be unpacked by morning, clothes folded neatly back into drawers, keys missing from the hook by the door. Once, the front door itself refused to open, no matter how hard I pulled. Arthur wasn't letting us go. The final night, I woke to the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, not the faint shuffles we'd heard before. These were solid, real. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs. The living room glowed with firelight. The fireplace, which hadn't worked since we moved in, roared with flames. And in the rocking chair sat Arthur. Not smoke, not shadow, but solid flesh. His cardigan was stained, his eyes dark pits behind his glasses. He didn't look at me. He looked at the portrait above the mantel, the one of himself. Then his head turned, slow and stiff, and his voice scraped out like dry leaves. "You don't belong here. You never did." The fire flared. The wall shook. The furniture scraped violently across the floor, resetting itself into perfect alignment, the way it had been when Arthur lived. I bolted upstairs, dragging Melissa and Hannah out of bed. We didn't pack. We didn't grab anything. We just ran. And this time, the front door opened like Arthur had finally decided to let us go. When we looked back from the road, the house stood still and quiet, the curtains drawn, the firelight flickering faintly behind the windows. We never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass old houses on dark streets, I see curtains twitch. I smell pipe smoke, and I hear a chair creaking, steady as a heartbeat. Arthur isn't just in that house. He's anywhere someone forgets that the dead don't leave willingly.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe.